Hola, hola, buenos días a las personas que nos acompañan a través de YouTube y de Facebook. El día de hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial en el Colegio Mexiquense. Le agradecemos al doctor Anis Ben Brik, quien nos va a impartir una conferencia en torno a la institucionalización de la evaluación, un tema muy, muy relevante para toda América Latina, pero también para el mundo entero. Y el enfoque del doctor Anis se ha especializado en los países del sur global. El doctor Anis nos va a compartir esta conferencia magistral y para ello me voy a permitir leer su semblanza. El doctor Anis Ben Brik es profesor asociado y director fundador del programa de evaluación e investigación de políticas sociales, también llamado Prosper, de la Facultad de Políticas Públicas de la Universidad Hamad bin Khalifa en Doha, Qatar. El doctor Ben Brik se desempeñó como director del Departamento de Política Familiar del Instituto Internacional de la Familia de Doha y anteriormente se había desempeñado como asesor político y consultor para muchos ministerios y organizaciones gubernamentales en la región de Medio Oriente y África del Norte, conocido como MENA. El doctor Ben Brik es el presidente fundador de la Sociedad de Evaluación MENA y del Observatorio Global de Investigación y Políticas Familiares. También se desempeña como socio organizador de la región MENA del Grupo Principal de Organizaciones No Gubernamentales de las Naciones Unidas. Ha publicado investigaciones empíricas en una amplia gama de revistas internacionales, revisadas por pares incluidas Children and Youth Services Review, Early Child Development and Care, Child Indicators Research and Decision Sciences. Sus publicaciones más recientes incluyen temas en torno a la familia, el cambio social, la región del Golfo y la evaluación, por supuesto. Es el investigador principal del proyecto de investigación internacional patrocinado por la ONU, El impacto de la pandemia en la vida familiar de todas las culturas, y también es el fundador de la Red para la Evaluación en el Sur Global. Dr. Anis Ben Brik, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you?
Good, how are you? Buen días todos. Buenos días todos. That's what I know in Spanish. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Professor Juan Carlos, for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you and your colleague in Latin America. And I'm in love with Latin America since many, many years. I've been in Latin America many, many times, almost all countries in the region. So thank you very much for having me, and it's my pleasure to present some of the findings of the research we conducted together, because we are only one team in evaluation in the Global South. So if you allow me, I will start maybe sharing my slides.
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
So thank you for the introduction. So the agenda of today, I'll be speaking on the status of the institutionalization of evaluation in the Global South, presenting some of the data on the index of the institutionalization of evaluation in the region. In the Global South, we mean here Latin America, Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. And I will be discussing the factors that shapes the institutionalization and the practice of evaluation, and some of the future direction. So some of the data here are extracted from many other research, but mainly the content of this presentation is the synthesis of our books. Our means myself and my colleagues, Professor Juan Carlos and others. There are two books which will be published very, very soon. The first book, the Oxford Handbook of Program Evaluation in the Global South. It has been a long time, but hopefully we'll see that book very, very soon in December or the first quarter of 2025. The second book is also another handbook by Elgar Publishing, another prestigious publisher. Also the handbook of public policy evaluation in the Global South, which was the outcome of the conference last year. In November, we organized the first in-person Global South Evaluation Conference, where many colleagues and friends from Latin America and Asia and other regions participated in that conference, presenting about challenges of evaluation in their region. So what we mean, the first the couple of slides, I will be presenting very basic concepts to explain how we measure the index of the institutionalization of evaluation based on the work of the great Professor Reinhard Stockmann. I just met him yesterday. We met in Saudi Arabia. I'm in Saudi Arabia now, another country in the Gulf region. So I met Professor Reinhard. Through their research, the Globe Evaluation Program, and based on the system theory, the institutionalization of evaluation consists of three systems. We mean by institutionalization of evaluation, we mean the political system, whether there is institutional structure, processes, including laws, regulation, and policies that promote the practice of evaluation at the government level. The second system, which is the social system, which focuses more on the demand side of evaluation, meaning the culture of evaluation and whether the civil society organization in particular are involved in doing evaluation or using evaluation, or also disseminating the findings of evaluation. So we mean social system here, whether there is a social acceptance by civil society organization or citizens in evaluation, whether they request a need for evaluation and they use. And the third system, which also considered as an important pillar of evaluation, which is the supply side of evaluation, meaning terms of capacity development. Is there any education programs, training programs around evaluation, but also research, whether there's an existing research, journals, dissemination of evaluation, and most important, whether there is a standards, any professional standards around evaluation. So in particular, as I said, the political system includes also the parliaments, if whether the parliament is engaged in evaluation, promoting evaluation, is there any legal mandate for evaluation across the different sectors of the economy? Also, the executive branch at the government level, whether they're implementing evaluation practice at the government level, and also is there any public trust to evaluation by different government entities? The social system, as I mentioned, is mainly focused on the in the social civil society engagement. Is there any public discourse in the media and social media on evaluation? And there is a demand for evaluation. And finally, the professionalization of evaluation, which, as I said, it's more related to the capacity building, training, and academic programs. So as I said, the data is based on, so we're ranking 36 countries. So some of the data, as I said, is drawn from the work of Stockmann, 2023, 2024, but also on the book I mentioned, is on a third book, which is the institutionalization of evaluation in the MENA region. So for those who doesn't know the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa is a region between Europe, Africa, and Asia. That's why it's called in the Middle East, and includes 22 countries. Some of the famous countries, you know, maybe in Mexico, Lebanon, maybe Morocco, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Dubai. Of course, most of the people know Dubai. So there are many countries in the MENA region. So I merged my data with the data provided by Professor Stockmann. And if you are interested in learning in the different regions, you can read his book. He did a book on Latin America, on Asia, and I just met him yesterday, and he said he's finishing the African region. My book on the Middle East is a contribution to his project. So here we ranked countries by the mean score. Means we merged the different dimension of the political system. As I mentioned, the mandate, is there any policies, regulation, the parliament, all those indicators are measured by a scale from 0 to 1. The methodology used on this research is qualitative, so we did not, or he did not, survey governments, because, as you know, of issues related to the quality of the data. So the data was collected using a country expert. For each country, the project hired a local expert in that particular country, and he answered and he wrote the report. The report, as I said, mentioned on the 3 dimension, and each dimension has a set of questions, and each expert has to write the country report, of course, backed by evidence. For example, if he mentioned that there is a law, he need to include the link or the evidence of that report. So this is more based on the qualitative instead of quantitative, which, as we know, the limitation of the quantitative, in particular in evaluation and in particular surveying government entities. So as you can see here, so the debate or the issues, what myself and my colleague, Professor Juan Carlos, always discussing in the Global South is this there's always debate of Global North and Global South and issues related to the colonization of evaluation and the context of evaluation, whether there is a need to create methods and practices relevant to the local context, and also why there is a gap in the Global South. So as you can see here, clearly, you can see that the 2 main countries leading the political system of evaluation, means in terms of laws and regulation, still the US and Canada, North America. But also, if you look to Mexico, since we are here in Mexico online, I think Mexico are doing great job in terms of the policies and regulation. And I was in Guadalajara in June. I met my colleague from Cival, and she clearly mentioned to me, at least, and outside Mexico, yeah, that there are laws and regulations. So here we're not talking about evaluation as a whole. We are just talking about the political part of evaluation, which is the regulation and laws and the mandate and the role of government and etc. So Mexico is doing great compared to other countries in the Global North. If you compare here in the slide, Mexico is ranked 4th after Morocco. The case of Morocco is very unique in the MENA region, and I think is also very unique globally, because I think one of the few countries they included evaluation in the constitution. So they revised their constitution and evaluation, using evaluation and doing evaluation at the government level is a constitutional requirement. That's why it's ranked very, very high here. Also UAE, which is Dubai, also they don't have it in the constitution, but in the Gulf, they have a kind of semi-constitution, which is called the National Development Plan. So there are 5 years development plans required to implement different programs and policies, and evaluation was part of that national development plan. So we seek a mixed here, but overall, if you look to focus more on Latin America, Mexico is leading, Chile is leading. I don't have explanation why Chile, but I hope that someone expert in Chile. But also overall, you see Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Peru, and also Costa Rica in the middle of the ranking. But those 3 countries, Mexico is leading, Latin America, Chile, Colombia, Peru are in the top ranking compared to, which is surprising to me, compared to Brazil, because I have many friends in Brazil and I read many chapters in Brazil, but it seems that Mexico is doing great in this particular dimension. So globally, if we want to see the big picture, again, this divide between Global South and Global North, as you can see, I mean, for the reason you know, and I know, and many other people know, that North America is leading globally in terms of the political system of evaluation, as I said, this in relation to policies and regulation. Now, if we go in deep, to look to the difference between regions. Here is the average of all countries in Latin America. Here the system is called Americas, but the other thing is Americas. Americas means everything. It means also North Africa. Please correct me. North America. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But here, so we took from the countries, the list of the 36 countries, we took out the US, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and Canada as North America. And you can see there's a huge difference or gap between the global north, those 5 countries, and the south. But also in the south, in the global south, Latin America is doing much better. Although look, the scale here is from 0 to 1. So in average, Latin America as a whole is still not doing well in terms of the political system of evaluation. So you have a score of 0.43, so below the average. So if you consider, I mean, you consider 100-point scale, so the whole Latin America is 43 points. So there is a huge gap, a lot of things to do in terms of evaluation policies and regulation for the Latin America as a whole. But also, as I said, Latin America is doing much better than other regions, the Middle East and Asia, in terms of the policies. Now we move to the second dimension. As I said, the second dimension is the social system, more focus on the role of civil society. Is there any public discussion, public discourse around evaluation? Means that evaluation is embedded in the culture of the society through NGOs, civil society organization, or the citizens' needs. And here's surprising to me, but again, this is one of the limitations of doing qualitative research, because as I said, the data was collected based on country expert, and with all the limitation with that. And you can see here, again, Mexico is doing great. By the way, we did not play with the data to make Mexico look great because I'm invited by the Mexican. This is the real data, so you can check it online. So you can, here you have the reference, Stockman, you can go to his book on Latin America and you check Mexico itself. He wrote a good, there are a chapter on Mexico. And I have also 2 chapters in my book. I have 4 chapters in my books about Mexico, 2 chapters by Professor Juan Carlos, and 1 chapter from Gabriela, the Eval Youth. So I already know the context of the Middle East based on my reading of the chapters. So again, the UAE and Mexico are doing great in terms of the policies. Maybe the difference in UAE is from Mexico, that UAE, as I said, it's embedded in the national development strategy, not perhaps there is no such regulation or specific laws on evaluation, but because they have embedded in that national strategy. So again, in Latin America, Mexico is leading in terms of the civil society engagement in the public discourse. So it means based on my interpretation of this result, in Mexico and Latin America, the second, I think, in ranking in Latin America is Colombia, then Chile again, then Costa Rica in the middle. So my interpretation of interpretation of this, that I expect that there is a public discourse in Mexico around evaluation and around the need of evaluation. Probably I expect that civil society organization are very active in evaluation in terms of promoting it, using it, but also it could be also an indication of the active role of Cival, because that's also an indication of how civil society is very engaged in Mexico. And of course, could be also because of the nature of the political regime or the politics in Mexico, which considered compared to other regions as a democratic country. That's my interpretation. So Mexico again, Colombia also doing great. But here, which is very surprising, you can see here that many countries are doing better than the US. I don't have an explanation. Why is doing better than explanation in the US or in Australia? So, I mean, of course, this is old data. Not all data means 3 years old data. So Argentina is also much better than the US and Australia in terms of the social system. So the big picture here, you can see, again, overall as a region, so we did the ranking by country, but if you compare the whole region in terms of average, North America is doing great, and you can see Mexico is doing much better here in many other regions. Better than the US, better than somehow, very similar, not that big difference. You're not talking about a huge gap here, but still Mexico is doing great and UAE is doing great. So in terms of civil society engagement or the needs, I know the context of UAE, they see evaluation from a performance management perspective. So for them, they have more interest in performance as a practice rather than impact evaluation or any other type of evaluation. Specifically, again, as a whole, again, North America is still doing much better, but within the Global South region, also Latin America is doing much better. And there are many explanations for this. What's surprising me personally, not the Middle East, because I always expect the Middle East to have many issues. In the Middle East, wars, conflict, and the political system in the MENA region is very different and unique. But I was surprised that to see Asia is not doing well in both in the political and the social system. Now we move to the profession system, which includes the supply side, the capacity building, the education, the training, the existence of standards. Is there any VOPs, voluntary organization for professional evaluation, similar to CEVAL or the Argentinian evaluation or the Brazilian evaluation network? And again here, the bottom, again, here is clear that the North countries, Canada, Australia, US, Japan are doing extremely well here. But what is surprising, where is Mexico? Where is Mexico? I don't see Mexico here.
In the middle, kind of.
In the middle, yeah.
Region.
Yeah, which is, I don't know. So I leave it to you, Professor, to explain. So the country is doing well in Latin America is Brazil, and then Costa Rica, Argentina, and Colombia. Mexico, is behind Chile, between Chile and Qatar. The question is, I read the other chapter. Maybe there's not enough maybe education programs in evaluation in Mexico. Maybe there is not enough training in evaluation. Something to consider for the recommendation. So overall, the big picture, as you can see here, my region is always behind because of many issues. But so Mexico is not doing well here in terms of capacity building and educational programs. So it could be, this is something to discuss between academics or for those interested in evaluation. But please, I mean, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there's something not reported in the chapters or something in new development happened in education programs. So here, as I said, it could be educational programs, could be a lack of research, could be lack of training, maybe not lack, but there is a limited programs. Within the region, here, Asia is doing much better. And I know Asia, why they're doing much better in here, because the active role of two countries, many countries in the Asian continent, but specifically Sri Lanka is doing great in capacity building. They have a master's degree and doing research and centers, but also APIA, the network of South Asia, is very active. But overall, you can see similarities, not that big difference between Asia and Africa. Africa is doing also as a whole, as a region, the South African colleagues, they're doing great job, and the Francophone Africa, the West Africa speaking French-speaking countries are also doing great in terms of capacity building and training and research. So this is overall the ranking. As I said, it could be an indication, and there are limitations in collecting the data and so on. So the big question is, there's two questions. We know why there is a gap between global north and the south, but also why there is a difference. What are the factors that overall, as you can see through the three systems, you see that somehow, except here and there, overall, that the global south is still lagging behind other regions. Of course, there are some leading countries. Mexico is one of them in the political and the civil society. But overall, we should answer this question. What is happening? What are the factors that shape the institutionalization of evaluation, the practice of evaluation? What are the factors that explain perhaps why the political system of evaluation is still not well developed? What are the factors that you might think explain the lack of capacity development and professions of evaluation in the global south? Here, so we looked at, as I said, so this is the synthesis of almost 66 chapters, because there are two handbooks and also the book on the MENA region, which also have 10 chapters. So in both of them is around 65 and 70 chapters focus on the global south, but also based on the conference we organized and many other literature and many other discussion I've been doing and my colleagues are doing. And of course, there's many other research conducted. So there are many factors. We can group them. I group them in the book into three main categories. There is a historical factors, including here the legacy of colonization and how it shaped public administration and public policy and the political system in those countries. There is the second group, which includes or related to the domestic political dynamics, because also shaped by that historic, but also because of many other factors. So there is domestic factors within each country, is the political dynamics, the relationship with civil society, many other things. And also external factor, which is sometimes international influence, dependency on donors, dependency on knowledge transfer. So those are three categories. In the book, we try to classify those organizations. Here, I will go in detail. So one of the first dominant factor identified in the literature in our book, which is the historical legacy, the colonial legacy. Many countries of the global south, I think a lot of countries, or most of the countries in the global south, has been somehow or another was colonized by other countries. And what those countries inherited, and here I'm not saying in a very negative way, it could be because you perceive it as a positive way. We inherited from those history, maybe administrative system, public administration system, governance practice, evaluation practice. Not, as I said, not in a bad way, but also we inherited challenges with those systems. It could be sometimes struggle to develop local governance structure. And I remember your chapter, Professor Carlos, about the local governance in Mexico, and also another chapter by Gabriela looking also to this challenge of local versus federal governance, local governance issues. So, but also those practices or those structure and practices somehow created many other challenges in relation to evaluation. For example, most of the structure inherited by those countries favor maybe elite in that particular country, which somehow challenge or create a resistance toward evaluation, transparency, a practice. And of course, I mean, if we have time, we can talk until tomorrow about the many issues in relation to those inherited systems and in relation to the political regimes, of course. So most of the many countries, they inherited the political regimes left, or also not just left, but somehow promoted by in post-colonialism. Another factor, which is also an outcome itself, it's a factor, but also an outcome of the previous one, which is the political institutional weakness, sometimes political instability, for example, in the MENA region, weak institution, underdeveloped governance structure in many countries, limited political commitment, political will, in lack of political will to establish any evaluation systems. As I mentioned, absence of national policies, laws, regulation. Also, some countries like the Middle East face security concern, access restriction, not necessarily war. So this is more kind of access restriction, biased evaluation, lack of availability of data collection challenges. I remember when I conducted the study on the institutionalization of evaluation in the MENA region, in Yemen and Egypt and many other countries, some of the researchers faced a serious issue. Because, as I mentioned, the political regime maybe don't allow those kind of practice, or you require many other approval. Cultural barriers to evaluation. Okay, those cultural barriers could be explained by imported evaluation frameworks, sometimes clash with the local culture context. Maybe it could be language barrier, evaluation terminology, for example, in our language, and I'm sure could be also a challenge in Latin America, in terms of translating evaluation terminology and whether this fits the culture. So in Arabic also, we have the same issues because Arabic is very rich countries, and sometimes one word in English means 100 words in Arabic. So we have this issue of language, not only in the terminology, but also in the practice of evaluation. Most of the evaluator, maybe it could be hired from the West because they have the skills, and then you have local barriers between the institution and the consultant, and so on. Sometimes concept maybe do not translate well in the local language, not relevant in that specific language. Cultural sensitivity also was an issue, which created conflict maybe with the global evaluation values and with local values and local norms. Okay, and power, as I mentioned, power dynamics, power structure. Okay, that's sometimes prevent the participatory evaluation process. So the top-down evaluation. There's also another challenge, which is related to the limited use of evaluation findings. Yes, some countries, they do evaluation, but yeah, there is limited use. Could be also explained by that some of the findings do not translate into policy actions. Also, the locally produced knowledge sometimes sidelined in favor of external expertise. And I'm sure we have many stories around this. Also, because of donor priorities. Sometimes the evaluation findings do not align with the donor's agenda, maybe will be overlooked. And also there is a knowledge action gap. Evaluation results sometimes, as I said, fail to translate it into actions, into recommendation. Also, another challenge, a factor that affected the institutionalization of evaluation, the civil society, which we mentioned. Maybe limited role of civil society in evaluation, could be restricted space for civil society in evaluation process. There's also credibility concern related to limited civil society involvement. And also, maybe there is a kind of a recommendation, but to increase the participation of civil society to make it relevant. So the challenge is is evaluation relevance to the local context. Another challenge, which is public participation in evaluation, limited engagement, public citizen engagement in the process in many countries. As I mentioned, top-down approach in evaluation. And there, of course, I mean, there should be more inclusion of evaluation. Another important factor that shaped evaluation institutionalization in the Global South, and this is one of the main factor, which is capacity and resource constraints. Limited evaluation capacities, shortage of trainer evaluation with the local knowledge, lack of financial resources to conduct evaluation, data quality issue, poor data quality, or lack of data availability. Also, there's a limited programs, as we mentioned before, across all the Global South. If you check the global education database by the World Bank, by GI, you will find very, very few master's degree or bachelor's degree in evaluation. One of them is in our university, is the only master's degree in evaluation in the whole MENA region. 22 countries have only one evaluation program, but guess what? In English language, which is again explained many of the and so on, and there are many other issues, many other cases in many other issues, which is again in our case the lack of the make it more culturally relevant. The financial constraint, limited budget. Most of the evaluation, at least in the MENA region, many other in Africa, in Latin America, are relying on external funding. So the donors' dependency here, this is an important factor. I mentioned the data quality and availability issue. Another issue we identified is coordination and the standardization challenges. So there are fragmented practice within one country or within the government. There's a lack of standardized evaluation across sectors or across regions. And there is a poor coordination between the different governments' activities. Also, there is varying qualitative standards. So not only there is lack of standards, but even those who are the standard of those existing standards sometimes are inconsistent or lack the quality. Another issue which we always discuss in the Global South, which is this balancing local and global standards, the culturally relevance, or the decolonizing evaluation practice is not. So we need to adapt those global. So first could be the standards themselves are not adapted to the local context. Think of the DAC criteria, to what extent that criteria is relevant to each country context. The practice and the concepts and the values and the methods used in evaluation sometimes are not relevant to the local context. I mentioned the important donor international organization influence. Sometimes their priorities shape evaluation methodology, and sometimes donors maybe impose evaluation approach not suited to the local context, and also some of the practice identified in many regions that donor involvement can hinder or help local evaluation capacity development, so both. And also the sustainability of evaluation system, because probably you'll find here and there some program has been evaluated, but they're not sustainable because, first of all, the over-reliance on external funding, issue with capacity retention, retaining evaluation professional, assuming that they already exist in that particular, but also another factor, which is institutional memory, or what I call the evaluation learning. Yesterday, I had a meeting where in Saudi Arabia, symposium on evaluation, discussing evaluation in multilateral or development banks, and I have a discussion with the director of the IEG, the Independent Evaluation Office at the World Bank. And one of the challenges faced by the World Bank based on my discussion with her and many other banks, of course, on many other entities, is the issue of evaluation learning, meaning that many organizations do not learn from previous evaluation activities. And she mentioned that sometimes the same recommendation will be maybe over and over, not just in the World Bank as an example, but many other organizations. So there is no that systematic learning from evaluation. So what should we do now? There's many practices, there's many challenges. So what should we do? I think based on the analysis we did for the different countries, I think the context, the localization, the contextualization of evaluation practice is extremely important. That evaluation methods, models, framework, you name it, criteria should be tailored to the global context, culture, realities, and values. The decolonizing evaluation, increasing indigenous evaluation, more inclusive and culturally relevant evaluation. That's, I think, one of the recommendation or the future direction for evaluation in the Global South. The issue of capacity enhancement or capacity development across many countries, capacity, whether more training, more educational program, strengthening local evaluation capacity. I think this should be another important strategic recommendation or requirement. But also technology adoption. We didn't mention that in the challenges but this is a requirement now. And again, I had this conversation yesterday with an expert in evaluation methods. And this guy, he has 20 years of experience methods, is one of the top evaluation methods. And he was explaining to me amazing how they use the technology. They're using the technology now to gather data. It's an amazing, I mean, I was listening to him and he's saying amazing thing. And the World Bank is doing this. So how to leverage, how to use new technology in more efficient and effective way in evaluation. So this is, I think, another big challenge in the Global South, not specifically related to evaluation, but that the adoption of technology is a big challenge for the Global South on many sectors. I mentioned definitely there is a huge requirement for indigenous evaluation approach, more community-based methods in evaluation, and also more ownership of evaluation, because we mentioned that there is a lack of use of evaluation by whether civil society organizations. So there is a need for more policy integration, integrating evaluation result in the policy making. And I keep mentioning my symposium because it was attended by one lot of large development banks, and the discussion was how to increase the integration, how to integrate evaluation into strategic thinking, in strategic planning, how to make evaluation not as a separate thing, but how to increase the value of evaluation, how to make the evaluation a strategic value for any organization, whether private sector or government. So how to integrate evaluation in decision making. That's what I think is required for evaluation. And of course, because of the challenge I mentioned in relation to the context, decolonizing evaluation, there is a need in the Global South to create a more innovative approach, more participatory methods, engaging the local community evaluation, engaging citizens, engaging women, engaging young people, make this evaluation speaks to the local context, relevant to the local context. But at the end, we are doing evaluation to make impact on the life of those communities. Those programs implemented by government or development agencies, the main purpose of those programs is to make a positive impact on the life of those citizens. So I think it's a common sense to include or to engage the beneficiaries, the people who are benefiting from those programs in the evaluation process. So there is a more need for participatory approach to evaluation in addition to the technology and so on. But overall, as you can see, there is also more need for the South-South cooperation in evaluation. I mentioned briefly some scores difference between Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East. But those challenges I mentioned, that all of them relevant to the same to the global South. As I mentioned, this is synthesis of 3 books looking to the challenges, and over across each region, those challenges are relevant almost to every country. The cultural issue, the donor independence, the lack of capacity building. There is a need for engaging citizen local communities, all of them relevant. I think there is a need, and that's what I'm trying to do with my colleagues, with people who believe in South-South cooperation, like Professor Juan Carlos and many other good friends in Latin America and many other regions. I think there is a need for knowledge sharing, learning, exchanging evaluation experience and best practices in the global South. We can learn from each other. We share very similar challenges, issues related to capacity building. So more collaboration maybe in relation to capacity building. For example, sharing, at least in my field, teaching evaluation, sharing maybe a syllabus, sharing material, which is culturally relevant. Maybe not, maybe the Middle East, maybe somehow it's not relevant to Latin America, but will be more close to Latin America than maybe Germany or Norway. And conducting cross-country evaluation. As I said, I mean, so this is, I think, important for the future, and the future is now. I'm not saying tomorrow or in 10 years, the future is now, today. I think if we want to move on with evaluation, with its strategic value in decision making, with the intention to make positive impact into the community, I think there is a need, as I mentioned, of localizing evaluation, investing in capacity building, leveraging in the technology, and more South-South cooperation. So thank you again for listening to this presentation. And thank you again to Professor Juan Carlos and to El Colegio Mexicanse for inviting me. And I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anis. This was a great lecture, and there is a lot of ideas you share with us that I'm thinking. First of all, you are proposing a qualitative index, and that is kind of that is disruptive. You know, you just broke a paradigm I had in terms of index, and in this idea that you see the subjectivity of the experts to in order to make a metric. I love it. I love it, and I think that of course Mexico, we have a great normative and laws and this political framework, uh, but in the implementation of this approach of evaluation in the local governments, we didn't, we already didn't do so well, you know, because we have like we have to make another kind of activities in order to implement the evaluation in local governments. And this idea of the qualitative index, I love it. I really love it, and I will try to apply it now because I was, of course, I have both methodologies, qualitative and quantitative, but this idea is I love it. I really I love it. About what is Global South? This question you have made, this kind of epistemological and historical context that shape the regions and the countries. And we can see, for example, in Mexico, when we read about public policies, always we are reading on the Norway, the Germany, US, and we cannot understand a lot of context, historical context, actors, ideologies, even religion, you know. And in Mexico, if we try to adopt the ideas of Sweden, we cannot, because we are a cultural, we are a culture completely different. So when you tell us what is Global South in terms of history, culture, language, religion, and some other factors, of course there are like a difference between the north and the south. We have the history of the Spanish colonization, and in Hispanic America, we then started to call it Latin America. And United States, they always saw us like another one, like the others. And we are like, we are the others, and it's okay. But at the ending of the last century, we made a economic pact that is called the North American uh, free treatment for, for trade, no? And this is, we started to call us North America, but we are not. Mexico, we are not North America. We are some other thing. We are not. Maybe geographically, we are kind of nearby United States, but cultural and some other things, some other factors, we are not that close. And for that reason, when I started to read you some years ago, and you made the invitation for the Global South conference, and I started to read about India, about Bhutan, China, North Africa, South Africa. I started to see that we have more in common, Latin America and the MENA region and Asia. We have more in common, and we can share the experience, because all these historical factors gave us, as you told us, institutional framework, and some problems now, like corruption, like war, like civil war, like wars with a religional approach, you know. In Mexico, we have now like this kind of civil war against drug cartels, but the state is now like another actor, because we have like the drug cartel, the state, and some communities that they made their forces, forces against the state and against drug cartels. So we have kind of civil war now, and since 20 years ago maybe, and we that is a context that when you try to apply policies or evaluation, you cannot, because there are some regions in Mexico, local governments. For example, some days ago, one of the municipal president was killed by the drug cartel, and and we have to make the political framework, but also some other social factors that are shaping our policies and evaluation approaches. So I love the idea that you gave us, like what is Global South, and for what reason we have to know each other, region or countries or experts or academics, or some other actors in the Global South. And how is evaluation? Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to make a small clarification that this idea of a global south is not something new. I mean, the South-South cooperation has been debated since the 70s and 60s, but in evaluation here, so we are not advocating for building walls or blaming global north. The whole idea is, yes, I think we should be a global collaboration on evaluation between global north, global south, and the regions. So what we are advocating for is localization of the practice. What we are looking for is relevance. The success of any evaluation or the key success factor or idea is relevance, the relevance of the outcome, relevance of the practice. So what we are calling, yes, we will learn from Norway or Germany or US or Canada, and uh, and this is what other countries in the global north did, is how to make this practices, those methods, those values speak to the local context because we need relevance evaluation. The whole idea is how to use evaluation to improve the life of other peoples. And you won't be able to do that without understanding what they need, understand their values, their culture, their history. So this is what exactly what we are advocating for. So it's a global knowledge sharing, in particular in the global south. Should be we should more emphasis on the local relevance, and why also, as you mentioned, the global south learning, co-learning from each other regions. As you mentioned, one of the common factor that somehow unite is a common feature of the global south is the history of colonization. This is one of the factor, which also this history is still shaping and shaped in the past and still shaping the political system, our way of doing policy, our way of governance, and so on. So this is what we are advocating for. I want to clarify. So this is not building a new wall or a war against other reasons or practice, or a blaming movement. This is not, I think, the way we should do in our regions. I think now with this global issues worldwide, climate change, this political issues in many countries, this global moral bankruptcy worldwide, I think there is a need for more united regions, more united people around universal values, values of democracy or values of freedom, values of human rights, values of dignity. I think that's what we need as a human being now, not in the future. Yes.
And this idea, the what to do, for example, when you told us about indigenous evaluation, I remember the experience of Africa in this idea of made in Africa evaluation, and they are trying to give the evaluation in some other languages like Swahili, for example. And that idea we can learn in Latin America because we have indigenous population in a lot of municipalities or communities. And for example, this idea about what to do that you are telling us in participatory methods, in making more democratic, more inclusive with the communities, they not only making the evaluation, but only using and making ours, like, and that idea, that this idea, I really love it because in Mexico we have, for example, in Mexico we have hundreds of communities, of indigenous communities, that they speak 68 official languages, but also they have dialectics, like you have Zapoteca language, but also you have dialectos, we call dialectical branches. So in this idea, we can learn about how to make the effort in order to involve these indigenous communities, because in the final term, the policy is trying to make better the quality of life, in communities, in population, in cities, in metropolitan regions. And this idea I think is one of we can learn from our peers in Africa, for example. And I was thinking about inviting Adeline Sibanda in
Yeah.
order that they tell us about the African experience and how they've been developing these inclusive methodologies. And for that reason, I was thinking that Latin America, we have a lot of learn and a lot of share with some other regions. And of course, Asia and the Arabic countries uh, also have a lot of experience to share. For example, Yemen.
Yeah.
This Yemen is now in kind of in the middle of a conflict,
Yeah.
but also they are trying to make the effort in order to make to promote evaluation in the local regions, in the whole country, in the policies,
Yeah.
and
But
uh,
also, if you allow me, but also, I think we need to also to mention the experience in Argentina. Our colleague, both of us, Celeste Guyano, she was the coordinator of the Latin American, the Caribbean Evaluation Network. She initiated a localized, similar to the MAID in Africa and Argentina, because also in Argentina they have indigenous people. And Celeste, our great colleague, launched the alternative evaluation movement, which I'm honored to be advisor to this initiative. So this initiative also looked to other way of doing evaluation, exactly as you said. So, and I'm sure there are many other initiative in Latin America which includes and engage indigenous evaluation. So again, as you mentioned, I think the challenge is how we can learn from other. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. There is many other and many great ideas and many great practice tackling the same challenges. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. We all have very similar challenges. Yes, the global south is very diverse, very rich regions, like many other regions in the global north, but also there are many cross-regional challenges. So yes, Made in Africa is one of the successful ideas. In the same in Bhutan, with our colleague in Bhutan, in Sri Lanka, and Argentina, and I'm 100% sure. I remember, I think our colleague Marcelo, I think Marcelo is from,
Clavijo, yes,
yes,
Marcelo Clavijo.
yes. Also mention some work on the localization of evaluation and indigenous evaluation. 2 years ago, I was in Canada, and of course, I mean, I was attending the Canadian Evaluation Conference in Quebec, and I met great people who are doing great job in indigenous evaluation. I never thought about it. That's my ignorance, but they're doing great job in Canada. I mean, so this issue is not only and engaging indigenous evaluation is not a global South issue. Even in the global North, there are many issues in relation to the making the evaluation context relevant, because that's what how we can make impact to on the local community.
Yes, in Yemen, we have Nashwan Ahmed,
Yeah.
uh, our colleague. And in Canada, of course, they have a lot of decades uh, making evaluation, thinking on it. For example, Dr. Leslie Paul, Dr. Gerald Hadner in Carleton University, they created they applied the methodologies of logic model, and it was a great effort. And we are now learning on these methodologies, and now we can make another ideas, making participatory in some other languages, some local experience, incorporating local actors. And I love the idea that we can first think what is global south, what is global north, how can we learn each other in our peers in the north, the south, making a dialogue. I love it. Thank you, Dr. Anis. And if you agree, maybe we can make another one, another session, because I'm receiving some felicitations, some congratulations, sorry, about Octavio García Ramírez, our colleague, Cecilia Cadena Inostroza. They are making some good comments in our social networks. So if you agree, maybe we can make another one, another session, another day. What do you think?
It will be my honor to be with you all the time. All you need is you just text me and I will be there for everybody.
Well, I'm making the close in Spanish.
Yes.
Bueno, les agradecemos a todas y todos haber estado con nosotros en esta maravillosa y muy brillante exposición del doctor Anis Ben Brik. La exposición fue en inglés, pero bueno, trataremos de incluir los subtítulos en español para que la grabación en YouTube pueda ser compartida en español, en castellano. Y bueno, pues le agradecemos mucho al doctor Anis por esta brillante exposición. La verdad es que fue muy fructífera, muy interesante, muy importante, y creo que podemos aprender muchísimo tanto de nuestros pares en el sur global como del norte global. Doctor Anis, thank you so much for being with us today. Really, thank you. It was a magnificent lecture. What do you
Muchas,
want to tell us?
muchas gracias. Thank you very much for everyone who attended. And it's always a pleasure to see you online and to speak to you and to speak all the colleagues and friends and brothers and sisters everywhere in this life. And I'll be happy to be with you at any time, as I mentioned. And I always believe that we are one family.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anis, and we will tell you some other day to be with us, sharing more of your knowledge. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias a todas y todos.